Hey guys, thanks for joining today. It's all about finding investors, marketing, marketing, marketing. We spend so much time focused on that, but let's be honest, it's one of the most important things if you're trying to raise capital for your business, for your real estate deals, for your empire. Today, we're talking to Vitaliy G, the CEO, the founder of Raise Ready Systems, and we're going to dive into different strategies, different ways to find those high net worth investors. So stay tuned and let's talk about it. Thank you for being here today. I'm just going to hit record and literally we're just here to bullshit and have a good time.
I love it, man. That sounds great. That sounds great. I got some of your questions here. I skimmed through them pretty quickly, but I'll do my best to.
It's more than anything about no dead air.
Okay.
And I hate to say it, I know every time that I am terrified about butchering your name in particular because is it Vitaliy? Vitaliy? Vitaliy?
Vitaliy.
Vitaliy.
And
Okay,
hey, I've
Vitaliy.
heard it all, but what you just did was one of the worst.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I'm extremely good at this, so now I'm going to very much unintentionally butcher your last name.
Let's hear it. Now you're just throwing insults, I feel like.
Oh my God. I see the start of it. GN.
Yes.
Gnezdilov.
Gnezdilov. So
Okay, well, it turns out I was never going to get that right, whether
yeah, well, hey, you got farther on that one than most people do, and I've heard it all, man. I've heard it. I've heard some of, yeah, and it's I was it's a I was born in the Soviet Union, so that's probably gonna explain kind of where that came from, and there's nothing soft about it. It's just very hard letters, and so everything is emphasized, and that's kind of how you have to approach it with that kind of mindset.
Gnezdilov. Dilo.
Gnezdilov. Yes, yes. And
Gnezdilov.
I try to keep it as it's I have a Russian background and it's kind of strange that I have to tell people, well, I'm Ukrainian as well, because my mom is half Ukrainian. I feel like I have to say that now, which is totally bizarre, but yeah, that's where I'm from and that's where I get that name.
Have I shared with you my Ukrainian family story?
No, I don't think you have.
Okay, so very true story, and you look just like Dima Linkovic,
Of course.
whatever it
I know
is.
him actually.
I mean, y'all look like twins, like cousins there. But no, it was he was a graphic designer that I started working with like years before this Russian-Ukrainian current war, that the issue going on.
Mhm.
Don't talk to him for quite a few years, and then everything started happening with Russia, and I just reached out to him, like, how are things going? And,
Mm.
what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? It's been a long time since we touched base. And it was literally like an Anne Frank's diary type moment because we
Wow.
started emailing back and forth.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about everything that was
All
going
while it's all
on
happening, right? Like in real time kind of thing.
completely.
Wow.
Down to, and then him and his three kids, 5 years old or younger, and his wife ran off, became, you know, refugees in Poland,
Mm.
trying to live in the camps, struggling with, there's thousands and thousands of people there, all of which are like the hotels are all of a sudden like 10 times as expensive.
Mm.
They're in a camp and just trying to figure out what's next. And I made a commitment to them. Hey, if
Mhm.
I can get you to the United States, I'm just going to make sure that everything is good for you and your family.
Mm.
They made their way to Germany. I
Mm.
got them a flight from Germany to Cancun.
Mhm.
Tried to get them up through the Texas border since I'm in Dallas, and like they
Mhm.
were just getting the recommendations left and right. Don't go through the Texas border.
Mm.
kidnappings are happening, sex trafficking is happening, and then you've got a beautiful wife, and these little girls don't go
Right.
through that border.
Yeah.
They end up flying to Tijuana. And then it's them and about 4,000 other Ukrainians at the, Tijuana, San Diego border. And they stayed there for a good 3, 4 days. I'd been reaching out to just kind of friends and people around, like what could be done to help. Eventually, a guy that I didn't know, it was like a friend of my cousin's that lived in San Diego, went down there, brought them food, kind of got them all set in a hotel for them to stay at for a while. And then when they went through their process, they got a humanitarian permit to come into the United States. Flew them out to Texas, and when they landed, I didn't even really know what he looks like. Now I know he looks exactly like you, but at the time, we like literally are passing each other in the airport. We just don't recognize each other from pictures, whatever that's worth. I go out and see this lady that's looking super confused with 3 young kids. And
Yeah.
I just like, okay, are you? And we connected. And then Dima comes out and just like, oh, we're both wearing like Pink Floyd t-shirts.
Oh,
Like,
funny.
all right. They moved in with us for a good 3, 4 months.
Wow.
I helped raise about $20,000 to help get them started with life. Got them into after that 3, 4 months, got them into an apartment right down the street from my office. They restarted their graphic design business in the United States.
Mhm.
And today, them and their 3 kids live down there in downtown Dallas and living their American dream.
Wow. That's unbelievable, Nate. That's they're it goes without saying they're going to remember you for life and are going to be and are grateful for you. I remember moving across the world, a little different circumstances, a little different itinerary, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done and my family has ever done, but I think back on all the success that I've experienced in this country, and I wonder what it would have been like if I had stayed. I was born in Latvia, and I wonder what would have happened if I stayed there. What I would have looked like. I'm sure I would have looked different. What jobs I would have, what career I would have chosen. And I'm actually a designer myself. Funny enough, not only do me and Dima look the same, I have a design background. That's how I started.
Apparently, it's genetics,
It's
since
got to
he
be.
is absolutely your cousin. Comically, I'm going to send you a picture of
You should.
him and be like, "Oh, I know that guy." Oh,
Yeah.
Dima.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, second
My
cousins. It's
friend.
great to see
Hello.
him.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's so funny. When I was in high school, there's like, three Russian kids or whatever, right? Eastern European. They're, oh, do you know so and so? Oh, yeah, of course. Like, because it's a room. You know everybody. But it's kind of funny that perception. But yeah, man, yeah, it was interesting. I moved here when I was 10 or so. So I've been in the States obviously longer now that I have, but I still had my childhood there. So I have that experience. And so I have that different perspective. And so yeah, it's a different world out there, especially now that it's under the EU. Before it was under the Soviet we'll call it rule. Yeah, it's a totally different animal. But uh there's some relics that a lot of the relics still remain. Obviously, the tall apart gray of Eastern Bloc apartment buildings. That's where I grew up. Totally different now. We're you know just I we're buying a new house. We're in the middle of moving. We're in the middle of popping a new baby out any day now. And so just where I look at this house that we're buying and I'm just like, wow, like what a castle compared to this tiny 2 bedroom apartment, and it felt so much bigger then.
Yeah.
And now I look back at pictures now and I'm like, wow, how did all these people fit in here? So
Yeah.
America's awesome.
And congrats. You are that epitome of the American dream. I'm sure your parents, they, like every first generation, I mean, just showing up here, it's a struggle. It's not easy. Did they speak
Oh.
English well when they showed up, or was it a
Uh,
learning process there?
no, no, it was almost starting from scratch. my mom speaks better English than my dad. I had some education of kind of a more advanced English uh, in Latvia when I went to elementary school there, but yeah, landing here, I had no idea what I was even doing. As far as schoolwork goes, I don't know what homework was. I didn't do anything, it was kind of bizarre. Um, and yet somehow in that first year I got kind of I landed on the honor roll somehow. I feel like I have this feeling that they just felt bad for me. It's kind of like, hey, let's give this kid some recognition. So I don't know, but yeah, it was definitely the most challenging thing is that rapid assimilation, right?
Oh yeah.
uh, yeah, and it's interesting too. Like, you can look back as an entrepreneur how much you have to grow, right? I'm going to kind of change the subject here a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's all tied to it. As an entrepreneur, how rapidly you grow and evolve as a human because you experience all these problems in such a sequential, rapid, compressed order, right? It's so different than having a job. You just show up and you're like, okay, you can kind of relax a little bit. But here you're swimming in the deep end constantly, and something is weighing you down and you're continuing to stay afloat, right? And you're just like hoping that you're going to land on a buoy or something that you can rest for a little bit, right? Until you have to go swim to the next. And it's very much similar to uh you know that kind of rapid accelerated growth that happens when you have to assimilate on the opposite side of the world with different norms, different rules. It's very similar. So I feel like that move had kind of prepared me as a kid to the life that we're living now as entrepreneurs. I'm sure you experienced that in your way, but you probably have a different story. So
Oh, just I mean, my passion is entrepreneurship. It's the whole reason I do any of this. I
yeah,
literally feel like
exactly.
I'm helping people live their best life through entrepreneurship. But just
Yeah.
since we're talking about it, like it's not any easier than having a W-2 job. In a lot of ways, it's way harder than just going
Yeah.
in from your 9 to 5. Sometimes like that world is on your shoulders, it feels like,
Yeah.
but so
Yeah.
rewarding.
It is. It is. It is. Yeah, like because of that growth. I think because of that growth, I always think like, okay, if I went back to a W-2 and I have a history with all of that, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, but I have had instances where I bounce back to a W-2 and I just realize how much better I interview, how much better I present myself, how much more mature I show up, as a candidate. And so it all translates, and it goes to your personal life too, how entrepreneurship levels you up, and um, yeah, better leadership. You become a better leader, obviously, with your team and at work, and then as a father and a husband in your family life as well as and a leader in the community, a friend, even so.
But I think
And
that's kind of the biggest thing when you go from that, everybody starts, and I haven't had a job now for 19 years. I mean,
Mhm.
this is just my life.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember as you get started, it's like you do everything yourself. You are the management, the bookkeeper, the technician, you're doing it all.
Yeah.
And at that point, it really is like, if you're going to succeed or failure, it's 100% on you. But pretty soon you do start seeing that level of success, start building a team.
Hmm.
And then comically, like things don't get more difficult, they get easier because now all of a sudden you're starting to build that engine and that machine that's just going to help you make it all happen.
Hmm.
Then the
Yeah.
best thing is when it grows so large that literally all my responsibilities are gone because I've got a team, I've got management, I've got the guys that are running it. So instead, I get to do the fun stuff like meet with
Right.
you
And
today.
it's an interesting transition when that actually starts happening because you're so used to the grind. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, the things that I used to be doing, now my team is handling it better than you could. And now it's
Yeah.
like it's almost like a strange feeling when that happens because you're like, well, what should I be anxious about now? because all this other stuff is being taken care of. It's like, well, it's like it almost kind of allows you to gracefully transition into your next role, and it's up to you to define what that next role is, right? Because you've got kind of leveled up. You said, okay, this level is taken care of. Now you have to identify what that next level is going to be, and then kind of build there.
So
It's
personally for you, kind of how do you design your own next role? Since we're in charge, we can design it. And I've got my own thoughts that I'll share as well, but I want to hear yours.
Yeah. Well, the way that we approach it at Raise Ready, um we approach things on a quarterly kind of basis. And so the way we look at it, this is very relevant, by the way, because we have a team of 10. We've grown tremendously over the past year. We've brought on probably 5 or 6 teammates. Um, and the way that it looks now, I'm sort of the operations part is handled. Okay, now it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing? Okay, now it's kind of ironing out the fulfillment, streamlining that a little bit. Okay, that's kind of done. Okay, now let's focus on sales, right? So let's level up ourselves by joining the various masterminds. We spent like and even now we're spending like 50 grand a year on like various different masterminds and different resources like that. And it's awesome. And it's not something that we would have ever, not something that we invested in that capacity, but it's almost like learning from people who are further down the line. And that's where we are right now is kind of drafting behind those guys and then passing down the wisdom to our team and to our
Love it.
clients as well, because these guys are going through rapid growth as well, right? Like here's an example. So we're in the capital raising business. We are a marketing firm, and we help clients kind of get their investment offerings in front of accredited investors. That's kind of our specialty. And um, some of these guys, some are more mature organizations. Some are, hey, this is my first raise. And they count on us to position them in the right way, get their branding right and all of that, and get out in the right light. And for one client, this is this is their first fund. And we launched their campaign beginning of February. The very first week they received 5 meetings. They got 5 meetings with investors. That's what we got, and that's okay. That's actually pretty good. Okay, if we can do that
That's a
consistently,
great
amazing.
start.
But the next week they got 19 meetings with investors. So their offering lit up big time. And so for somebody who had 0 meetings with investors one week, 5 the next, 19 the following, it almost breaks a business how rapid that is, right? So you experience such rapid growth that way, right? All the systems break at this point. You have to kind of scramble and figure out, okay, like how do we make this, how do we stay afloat so that we can follow up, we can run our operations, we can,
Yep.
source the next deal, et cetera. There's a lot that goes into it. So that's kind of, having that perspective of us experiencing that and then learning from others how to
Yep.
navigate that, us experiencing and then passing that knowledge down to our clients as well. So they don't, trip and fall.
And I'll be honest, that I've had some years where I've literally spent $150,000 a year on masterminds and education. And as you're saying, like you got to be in that room with the guys that have been there, that have done it. They're already building the path for you.
Mhm.
Just, follow their lead. Don't stumble on the rocks and the roots that you normally would because they've
Yeah,
already done it for you. I mean, it kind of pays for its weight in gold
it
as
does.
a business training tool.
Yeah. And it's almost like that story where um, I'm just going to paraphrase it. Somebody ran a 5-minute mile, right? People have been trying to do that forever. Somebody runs a 5-minute mile. Now everybody's running a 5-minute mile. Of course, that's,
Yeah.
paraphrased big time, but the essence remains. And seeing some of these guys, um, you know, uh, be successful with capital raising and being building their businesses. And here's another example of how we kind of make this happen. So part of our process is turning our clients into content generation machines, right? We help our clients advertise their offerings on social media, and it is by far the best platform to get your offering in front of accredited investors. And it's fast too, as I mentioned before. And um, so to generate this content, um, we task our clients and we kind of prep them for what needs to happen. And the very first iteration of the content that they generate is more than likely going to be unusable. And that's part of the process. We accept that, but it allows us to sort of gauge where they're at so we can help them so we can give them feedback.
And I remember doing some of my first, and it's just
Yeah,
embarrassing to look back and like, oh
it's
my
better not.
God.
And then there's also there's kind of a rule that says just accept that the first 10 pieces of your content are going to be complete garbage. But that's part of it. In order to get good at something, you're going to have to suck at something for a little while. You just have to accept that this is a journey and this is an investment you're making. And so that energy transfer that needs to happen in order for the client to actually see, oh, this is what my video should look like. It becomes much easier so they can actually mimic that energy. Because if they don't have any examples whatsoever, then there's not a direction, there's not a guidance there.
So let me ask you a little bit more about your process. And comically, we'll do the intro at the end because we've just rolled right into stuff.
No worries,
Uh,
no worries.
your marketing agency is Raise Systems, isn't it? Did I say it right?
Raise ready systems.
Raise
Yeah.
Ready
Yeah.
Systems. Now you're talking about creating social media content. We've talked a little bit about, organic, how you're really leveraging that. Do you have a well-defined system of, I'm a brand new client, I've never really done any social media marketing. Like,
Mhm.
walk me through those first like introductory educational parts of let's get ready to launch.
Yeah. So one of the first things that the client has to iron out is what is their investment offering. And this is where you come in is one of the first questions we ask is how are you structured right now for your capital raise? If it's a 506B, not a good fit for us because we're doing general soliciting to people you don't have a pre-existing relationship with. But if it's a 506C, then we're good to go. That's who we work with. So that's first and foremost, making sure their structure is right, making sure they have an offering that's attractive, making sure that they have a deep enough track record professionally so we can leverage that. Even though if it's their first raise, if the guy has 20, 30 years experience as a CFO or some kind of investment related um, role, then we can totally leverage that. We can create narratives out of that. And so that's kind of our job, is to make sure that these guys have a pitch deck that is attractive, that looks professional, that we can develop trust with investors. And then once they have that, we uh,
Before we jump
yeah,
on to the next,
sure.
because you did bring up regulations, I just kind of
Yes.
want to mention a few things.
Okay.
You said Reg D Rule 506B doesn't really fit for
Correct.
what you're doing. Just
Yes.
so everybody understands, with Regulation D, you have that 506B rule that you're actually not allowed to advertise. They call it general solicitation. Then they have a different one that's Regulation D Rule 506C that you are allowed to advertise on social media, email
Mhm.
blasts, elsewhere, but you're limited to only being able to accept those high net worth accredited investors. So those are the two different paths. However, I'm going to challenge you right back for those 506B guys. The issue is not they're doing a 506B. The issue is they haven't talked to you early enough.
Mm,
Because with Reg D 506B, you're not allowed to advertise, but you can reach out to those that you have a relationship with,
mhm,
that you've already been communicating with. So if you are able to build your own community, your own network, that you are actually building these relationships before you get to the offering standpoint,
mhm,
then everything that Raise Ready can provide really does make a huge amount of difference. It's just, are you starting now, you're looking for the dollars immediately, or can you have 6 months plus to start creating more of that organic reach
Mhm.
so that maybe you are actually able to raise capital a lot faster and easier because you've built those relationships to begin with. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that you have a platform for 506B. Could you just mention that really quickly, just so that people kind of are aware of their options in terms of getting their offering out there?
That is a whole different platform, and it's not for the Reg D 506B. It's for what's called regulation crowdfunding,
Oh, sure.
crowdfunding lawyers. It actually allows people to raise up to $5 million from absolutely everyone without limitations on how many of the, well, regular people like us, that non-accredited, everybody can invest, but it's still open to the high net worth investors as well. We work with all the different portals out there. I was a partner, but literally just sold out of Crowdfund My Deal. Another one of these platforms that just allows you to raise capital from everyone out there and to kind of just bounce off what Raise Ready systems are doing versus like this regulation crowdfunding platform. What you're talking about is marketing towards the high net worth, that top 10% of the wealthy of America.
Mhm.
Now, they're the ones that will write a big check. If you're trying to raise capital fast, you have a closing date, you're trying to acquire a business or a piece of real estate, that's definitely the direction to go. But if you can take a little bit more time and instead of just targeting that top 10%, you're targeting 100% of America, then regulation crowdfunding may be a way to go. There's just a bunch of other regulatory requirements behind it. But the wonderful thing is you can work with Vitaliy here and really start marketing towards the world, and the world can invest instead of just those high net worth. So that I think that was the alternative that you were bringing up as well.
I was. That's right. Yeah, thank you for that background. So the Reg CF is kind of what that's known as. But
Yep.
the type of uh, marketing and advertising we do is specifically toward accredited investors. And it is uh, important to kind of understand the type of investors that we bring on because and where they are in their buying journey. So we tend to bring on and attract through our campaigns those that are close to making an investment decision. They're in the process of evaluating their next placement, essentially. And so the types of calls that we generate and the types of meetings that we generate are of those that are kind of like, okay, I have X amount to deploy, is generally in the 50 to 100 plus range. And they're now just kind of shopping around to see what their best deal is. And so when we bring our clients uh, offerings in front of them, these people are specifically seeing their very offering, whether it's a fund or it's an individual asset, or we can market it on an investment thesis level if there's enough of a deal flow and it's consistent, if it's kind of the same similar profile of deals, we can market it in that way as well. Um, and
Just so I
then,
can clarify,
yeah.
and a lot of our clients are real estate syndicators that they may have a bunch of deals on an ongoing basis. One deal ends, the next one is opening up. Is that kind of what you're referencing? And maybe you may do more advertising for the parent company beyond just that specific offer?
Exactly. So, and it allows us to build and establish an evergreen, more an evergreen campaign than having to create all this content and all these different funnels for just one raise that's going to wrap down in, 60 to 90 days, right? And so it allows us to kind of go long and then uh, pre-sell the investor on the sponsor, on their track record, on their asset class. And then when they're in the funnel, then you kind of pitch the deal, and we have a special sequence for how we kind of reveal a new raise, and a whole cadence of communication that goes out relating to that.
Okay. So, and just to kind of put them in terms that I'm used to, first we
Mhm.
have that awareness of you're just making sure that people know about the deal or the company.
Mhm.
Your next step is to build their kind of authority and trust,
Mhm.
which is kind of just building up the, whether it's the investment or the issuer itself. And now we're more talking about that conversion of a specific, here's the deal. Now, how do I get people from you know me, now you like me,
Mhm.
now I want you to buy from me? And is that kind of what you're talking about at this point?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's a special way of kind of communicating this, because you don't want it to be too nebulous as far as like, oh, just get to know me as a sponsor. Like, people want to know what's in it for me first and foremost, right? So the way that we create our content for our client is it's very kind of results oriented, and it's a mixture of both kind of the analytical approach, but also emotional appeal. Because remember, people buy with emotion and they justify with kind of their analytical side. So that's key. And there's really three things that we measure to kind of unlock our sponsor clients for a sustainable capital raise in perpetuity. And there's three main things. These are the top level kind of things that we unlock. Is one is getting investors to respond to the offering. When they see the offering, are we getting enough investors that raise their hand and say, I want to learn more about this? This is interesting to me. Because if we're not getting people at that stage, or as many as we'd like, then we're kind of, maybe we need to kind of restructure how we're talking about the deal, or maybe the deal is just not that attractive, but even on lesser attractive deals, we've still been able to generate meetings. It's just closing becomes a little tougher, right? So first is are we getting enough people raising their hand? Second is, well, if we're getting this many people to raise their hand, how many of those are actually scheduling a call, and how many of those are we through our investor concierge service? Because we call every lead that we generate for our client, which is a big, big deal. Within 5 minutes of them raising their hand, they get a call from one of our team members, and then so uh, and then how many of those are actually getting on a call with our client, right? So either through us or through themselves scheduling a call, how many of those leads that have raised their hand are converting into a meeting? That's key. So that's the second thing. The third thing is how many of those meetings are actually converting to dollars raised. That's the most challenging part right there, as everybody I'm sure knows. But yeah, getting meetings with qualified guys who are getting to these calls, and they're like, oh, my family invests in hospitality. We already have a portfolio. This is really great offering. This is really appealing to me, right? Like, that's already a big, big win to have a consistent stream of meetings like that are kind of pre-sold already. So that's at the end of the day, kind of what we generate. And then once the conversion rests on the investor relations team from our client, and of course, at the end of the day, the attractiveness of the offering. So that's kind of important to
Do you
understand.
have any trainings or recommendations for trainings for when you have the investment relations team or you have your client themselves? They've got to close.
Yeah,
And you can put 1,000 people in front of them, but if they can't close, they're still not getting
yeah.
investment dollars. Like, do you help on that side as well, or at least say, hey, you need to go get this training?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. We're a marketing firm. We're not a sales coach, but we do have relationships with several sales coaches that we connect with our clients' investor relations teams and say, hey, take this training. We also have kind of frameworks, and for it's not exactly a script, because we don't want everybody sounding the same, but we said, hey, on this very first call, this is what you want to touch on, right? And so make sure to go through this entire kind of framework on the very first call that you have to give yourself the best chance. But not only that, here's kind of where it gets interesting, how this ties into the content creation. After every single call that we organize for our clients with an investor, we ask the sponsor or the investor relations team to fill out a brief survey that kind of creates a little disposition for how that call went. Did they show up even to the call? If they didn't, we're going to call them back and try to reschedule that meeting. If they advance into due diligence, which is kind of the next step where we want them to go, how much are they thinking about committing? Okay, and kind of there's opportunities to leave notes along the way. If they did not advance into due diligence, why not? And there's kind of a list of drop downs and a place to leave notes. And so we collect this feedback and create kind of FAQs for our clients, right? You do enough of these, you're going to find a pattern for how to address some of these things. For some of the newer sponsors, they're going to get questions that they have never heard of before. They don't really know how to answer. But enough of those questions, you're going to develop a response, a good response. And so we'll work with our clients in this capacity. But where this content comes in is if we have a question that comes up a lot, we want to be able to create a piece of content that we can send to the investors in advance of the meeting, because you want to address those, we'll call them objections, kind of from a traditional sales perspective, before they even come up. So it already kind of says, okay, these guys have been around the block long enough to know what people are interested in, how they're thinking about things. They've already thought about it in advance. So that content is huge. And so we have our clients create a whole library of this content that they can leverage themselves in their follow-up. And then we're also reinforcing our kind of lead up marketing machine to the meeting and beyond to kind of reinforce this content with this material.
Well, Vitaliy, I'm just feel like I keep butchering your name, but I'm just going to keep butchering it. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right, Vitaliy.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Vitaliy.
Yeah. You got to put an Italian twist. People like the Italian route too, by the way.
Vitaliy, I got it.
Exactly.
So I actually want to kind of look at that for a second, because that really does differentiate what you're doing from a lot of the other marketing agencies that we work with, a ton of them. And they all have our goal is to just get more people to your landing page, or our goal is to get more people for you to talk to. I talk to the other side, the clients, a whole lot. And the biggest downfall that I'm seeing on the other side is like, yeah, I talk to people, but they weren't really teed up well. We didn't close. We don't have the ability. A lot of it is just kind of that knowledge before they even get to the call. And so I just really want to emphasize for everybody that is listening, also really to hyper focus on what you're saying, because you are looking at that conversion aspect. Somebody getting to the door, if they didn't get all the way through it, why? And how can you change your marketing, your touches, and that whole process as well? So I just want to give you a lot of accolades on that, because honestly, most marketing agencies simply don't.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know what's funny? We actually don't call ourselves a marketing agency for that very same reason. We call ourselves a marketing firm. It kind of elevates the perception of the type of service that we deliver, and it allows us to kind of differentiate. Because how's your agency different from what? We're not like that. We don't want to even play in the same ball game with those guys, because at the end of the day, we want to see those dollars raised. That's the thing that we know that the client is hiring us so we can get dollars across the finish line and help them meet their raise. That's it, right? It's not about the meetings or the leads, although that's important. You kind of learn along the way, but the conversions is what we are most interested in. And we judge every campaign and the campaign's success based on kind of a 3% cost of capital. If they're able to establish a 3% cost of capital between our fee, between the advertising spend, which is the majority of it, if we can get them on a 3% or less cost of capital, then awesome.
Makes sense. Would you say, I mean, you're bringing up ad spend, so you're boosting posts, you're doing pay per click. Would you say there's a much greater emphasis in what you're doing on that side versus let's help you create that organic community or organic growth? Kind of, what do y'all do, or what's your focus primarily?
So it's specifically on advertising or creating sponsored posts. So there's a couple of
Hmm.
ways to do that, right? We don't boost any posts, we don't boost any organic stuff. These platforms, let's talk about that, like the Meta platform. We're specifically talking Facebook and Instagram. You go to a sporting event or you go to somewhere busy, people are on their phones all the time. And it's a billboard that's attached to your face that knows an incredible amount about who you are, right? We've all experienced this. It's you have you know, you say something aloud, right? And all of a sudden you start seeing ads for it. And it's totally creepy, but it's one of the kind of the digital markers that are being implemented in order to pair uh, the user, the platform with the offering, because it knows kind of what people are shopping, right? It knows who's accredited. That's how we're really good at targeting accredited people. Um, and so it's a really powerful method, which in contrast, when you write some blog posts or do a podcast or something like that, all of those things are good. They should be doing everything. But it's really slow in comparison to our method because we can fill your calendar in a matter of weeks. Like as I mentioned before we launched the campaign, it takes, roughly 2 to 4 weeks to launch a campaign with us. And I mean, as soon as you do, you're seeing meetings on your calendar, right? So it's much, much faster and much more scalable too, by the way. But it also requires an investment, right? It requires an
Uh,
investment. Whereas writing blogs is essentially free. You're only investing your time, but it's really, really slow. You might get a meeting or two a year or whatever, right? In comparison to you might get 3 to 5 meetings or even more, as I mentioned before, a week, right?
And in terms of the funnel, because I know you're doing things a little bit different or a little bit the same as some others. You have the paid posts, they're driving traffic to, I presume, a webinar, or you have the information capture, and it's literally your team that will IR in terms of, are you suitable? Is this something that you're interested in before you take those next steps of actually talking to the client? Is that kind of the way that you have your funnel set up, add to webinar, to phone call, to talk to the sponsor?
Yeah, there's a couple of steps in between. And so
And you don't need to share all your secret sauce,
thank you
but
for saying, yeah,
everybody
thank you.
likes to think through these things.
Yeah, of course, of course. So there's a couple of qualification steps. So we create content that's attractive, that gets people to raise their hand. Then we ask them to qualify themselves by filling out a brief kind of questionnaire. And then immediately after they fill it out, we get notified that hey, somebody filled out this form. They expressed interest. So our cold calling team picks up the phone and dials them up and says, hey, uh, noticed you expressed interest. Wanted to confirm the information that you gave us. So they verify their contact info, make sure that they're qualified. They make sure also that they had seen all of their investment marketing materials, so that we want to avoid conversations that by the time when they get to the investor relations team, they go, oh, what is this about again? Totally forgot. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure that they're teed up as best as possible. That's kind of where the concierge part comes in, right? They're not just an appointment setter. Like we want to create an experience here. It's a world-class experience that we're looking to build. Um, and so yeah, at that point, there is a couple of marketing pieces that go out prior to the meeting, and then so that they're teed up as best as possible. And even if they schedule the call themselves, we still call them and say, hey, saw you schedule the call, congratulations, we're excited to meet you, just wanted to confirm some information prior to our call. So yeah, that's kind of the funnel, right? So qualification, twice actually, phone call and form, marketing leading up to the meeting, and then kind of a tailored follow-up after that based on the conversation.
Nice. Let me ask you this, real estate versus business.
Mhm.
Very different, at least from my perspective, different approaches. Uh, But in your world, are you doing things completely different based on, hey, I'm buying real estate, buying a business, or I'm a brand new startup? Or is it all very similar in process?
It's well, it's interesting because everybody has every sponsor, depending on the industry they're in, depending on kind of their personality, we advise with what we believe is going to work best, but we want to make sure that the client comes off congruent with how they feel the experience should be for their investors, right? So we're very careful about that, but we're also going to say, hey, if you think we're sending too much marketing material too often and you're uncomfortable with how forward we are on your behalf, we can tailor that down, but maybe avoid sending one email a week because it's not frequent enough at the very, very top of the funnel if they didn't even schedule a call yet, right?
Right.
So we're kind of advisors in this regard, but we're very careful about kind of meeting the client at their comfort level and how they want to be perceived by investors, because we don't want to come off too thirsty, so to say, right, for capital um and so we want to be kind of we want to help them build a brand at the end of the day too.
I think it's funny where you're like, I got to imagine a lot of your clients says, no, 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 we don't want to annoy people.
Yep.
Let's be a little bit more gentle. And
Yes.
then, like, I know on the marketing side, it's like, yeah, let's hit them every day for 30 days. And if you haven't sold by then, you're probably not going to sell anyways. So who
Right.
cares?
Right. Yeah. No, it is funny like that. But there's one piece of feedback that a client actually got that we know of, is that the investor said, well, I invested because with somebody else because they reached out more than you guys did. So that was like, okay, wow, that was a really kind of an eye-opening thing. Of course, every investor is different. Every investor is different. So who knows what that experience is like, right? Like, because people want investors who are high quality, they want true limited partners, who are not gonna, bog them down operationally. Um, so yeah, I can't speak to as to what that relationship was, but yeah, that was one piece of feedback that we found really interesting. But yeah, at the end of the day, you just have to apply tact to the whole thing, and you also have to measure it,
Yeah.
right? Like if we're doing something too often, let's go on the opposite end. That's personally how I like to do things and test things. You say, hey, let's do the complete opposite, see how that goes, and then you calibrate from there and find a good mix in the middle.
Let's send way too much and then let's not send anything
Anything at
whatsoever
all.
and
Yeah.
figure out which way's better.
Yeah. And it
Okay, in
depends
the
on the
middle there.
industry. The real estate guys are used to being sold in a different way than biotech, for example. It's a
I
different
know how
process.
true that statement was. I want to hear your different perspective on why the sales process or why the investor psychology is so much different for real estate
Yeah.
versus biotech, as an
Well,
example.
I think it's the return profile as well, because the real estate guys, they're, the whole promise or premise, I should say, is like, hey, we'll print money and you'll build equity, and that's great. So people want to get going to generate that return and deploy the capital. For biotech, as an example, um, it's a little bit more of a longer game. There's it talks about an IPO and buying shares at the lowest cost they'll ever be, that kind of thing. And there's not a cash flow component because the real progress for the biotech firm doesn't start until the the IPO event. Then it sort of begins at that point, right? So it's a totally different mindset and around the timing and the expectation for the returns.
Yep.
So you have to kind of cater to that, because if you blow through your marketing in the first month, which we develop ongoing as well, but you want to you sort of want to match the pace of the offering. That makes sense.
It's kind of interesting, at least in my 25 years of being in the investor world. Uh, you're right with the real estate. You have that risk and reward of, hey, I know there's an asset there. It's not as great of a return, but it's less risky of a return compared to, say, a startup.
Yeah.
Versus, I mean, what we used to see a lot of, especially being in Texas, are people pitching oil and gas.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oil and gas was much more of a buy now because this is the greatest well ever, whether that's real or not, which it never
Right.
is. But act now because you won't be able to invest later on. You miss this boat entirely. So it is way more of a emotional, not as much of a technical sell. And then you have the companies, the startups, which is even all the more difficult because you at least have we have these designated rounds. You got to get in now because maybe or maybe not, we have a future round. But I can tell you, even if you like us down the road, it's just going to cost you that much more. Where's your risk and reward temperament? Hopefully, you're looking for those 10x returns. That
Hmm.
means you got to invest in early stage, but it's higher risk at the same time.
Yeah, exactly right.
Different approaches, different investor profiles, different types of businesses, and definitely it all needs to kind of fit together.
Yeah. And different
Different
leaders,
marketing strategies every time.
it's a different leader that runs a real estate deal than a different leader that runs biotech. Different.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely nailed it. But
So,
at the end of the day, on average, any buyer being an investor for what we're talking about, they're touched about on average, what is it, like 6 times before they actually buy?
yeah, yeah. It depends who you ask, but it's somewhere in the 6 to 12 range, you know.
What's your opinion? I say 6. What do you say?
I want to say about 10, probably closer to 10. And it depends on the type of content too, by the way, because this is where organic content comes into play. You got the attention, you're in the funnel. Now, where are you taking them from that point? That's where YouTube videos are amazing, right? Because now all of a sudden you feel like you're doing the research. You feel like you're a sophisticated investor and a savvy investor because you're like, oh, look at all the due diligence I'm doing, right? So that's where this is a perfect opportunity um for organic content to shine.
Love it. All right, well, we're running short on time. Vitali,
There you go.
you got anything that you'd like to share, teach? And of course, we got to get your contact info. But any last thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me on the show. I come from a background where we had actually started this business being GPs on various deals. And so between myself, I have a design and branding background. My partner has a marketing and advertising background. He's been advertising for private equity investments for basically since the inception of the Jobs Act, so over a decade now. And he is actually the one who turned me on to this space, and we've been in it for about 7 years now. So yeah, there's a lot there, and it's advances rapidly, and so I would say there's a lot of people trying to do this on their own, and that's great. If you are kind of looking to advance your business beyond that, this is where we would come in. We become sort of a natural extension of your company, even if you already have a marketing team. We love working with marketing teams. But this I believe is the future of uh, investor outreach. It's a scalable, and the marketing and the quality becomes so much better the more time that goes by. So yeah, if you're interested in trying this out, yeah, I'd be happy to have a discussion with you and see if it's a good fit for you.
Love it. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Yeah, you can find us on raisereadysystems.com, and there's a button in the top right that says something about get started. So yeah, that'll allow you to fill out a quick questionnaire that allows us to get to know where you are and what you're looking for. And then that'll allow you to schedule a call with us, and we'll take it from there.
Love it. Vitali, so nice to have you today. We'll also be dropping your contact info in the summary below. So definitely anybody that's looking to get more deals done, expand your reach, Raise Ready Systems. Vitaliy, I'm totally going to butcher your last name now. So, Gnezdilov.
We're gonna have to have a separate call.
We are so going to have to.
Well, Nate, thank you for having us and thank you for providing this platform. We love referring people your way. You provide a great service to the entire crowdfunding and capital raising industry. So keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing a great job, and I really appreciate you as well.
Vitaliy, appreciate you and everybody else here. Thank y'all.
Thank you.